So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen from Learnosity.
Good deal. Do I need to do anything with this? Are we good? All right. How you doing? Steve Krum, work with Learnosity, I'm VP of Business Development. For those of you that are not familiar with Learnosity, we are an API-based assessment engine that sits inside a variety of ed tech learning platforms in the world that kind of help out students, professional learners, K-12, higher ed, what have you. We support about 80 clients. We're a small organization, only about 80 employees based out of Dublin, Ireland. But that represents about 25 million annual users and about 100 million assessments each calendar month. So pretty massive scale. And from us, really where I'm here today is to talk about big data, because a lot of what we do is, while we used to be an assessment company, we're becoming more of kind of an analytical company, and we support our clients to kind of deliver whatever they're looking to kind of report against. So I'm going to talk about my wife and kids quite a bit today, kind of bring it home. So I figured I'd show them. That's Caroline on the left-hand side, and that's Isabel on the right-hand side. Interestingly enough, Mike, your presentation earlier really hit home. Caroline had RSV, and it was not fun. So if you have any infants who've had RSV in the past, then you know exactly kind of what the experience is. But really kind of start off with what in the world is big data. People talk about it, but I wanted to provide kind of a definition that Gartner kind of looked on the internet, found a bunch of things, Wikipedia pages, everything. But everyone talks about it, but just kind of give you a sense of setting the stage of what exactly it is. So extremely large data sets that may be analyzed computationally to reveal patterns, trends, and associations, especially relating to human behavior and interactions. So that's one definition. Now I'm going to move to kind of a slightly inappropriate definition. So, went too far. So this was by a Duke professor, and this is how he thought about big data. So I'm not going to read it, but you kind of get the idea, right? Because it very much is kind of, I mean, I saw a lot of quotes about it, but I think this one is a great definition as to what it is and what people kind of think about it today. So where it comes from. Everywhere, all over the place, everything you're doing, every interaction, loyalty cards at the grocery store is what it used to be. And lo and behold, those grocery stores weren't really using that data for much. But now they've realized, as Amazon starts to take over and the 500-pound gorilla, they realize that they really need to harness that information. Sorry, hold on just a moment. I don't want to connect to the internet. Go back to where we need to be. Okay. So it's social media, it's interaction on the internet, it's Facebook, and it's Facebook's kind of AI engine and how they had to shut it down because it started speaking its own language. If you saw that in the news, I thought that was really interesting. But everything that you do creates kind of this digital footprint, and an interesting terminology that I saw introduced is digital exhaust. So what comes out of you and you leave behind, right? So a big piece. But around kind of data and what it actually means, interesting statistics. So I never even knew that quintillion was actually kind of a numeric value, but every day we're creating 2.5 quintillion data points. And that's, in the last 3 years, we've actually created 95% of the world's data. So if you think about it, you need to harness that information and create type of results, right? So is it being in the airport and scanning the security cameras and figuring out kind of, how to fight terrorism? Is it figuring out kind of what the next big thing is going to be? Is it, what is my consumer profile, right? Who, what, where is buying my products? And when are they doing that? But really above all things, when you think about big data, it's not so much about kind of figuring out what it is and what data points you need to look at. It's making sure that what you're kind of honing in on is actionable. I mean, that's the biggest piece. That sure, you can do reports and you can analyze data, but if you're not figuring out kind of what you're going to do with that information and create some type of actionable result, then it's not going to be a beneficial type of scenario to go through. Okay, so you'll see me kind of touch upon a lot of things that have been previously discussed, but the 3 V's of big data. So historically speaking, the challenge was always volume. It was the amount of data, and the computer processing and the information out there just couldn't handle the amount of data that was being ingested. Now, today, it's migrating more to velocity because everyone wants information immediately and quickly, especially from an educational perspective. It's when do I need to intervene? When do I need to, if we're sitting in front of a classroom of 30 students and it's no longer the sage on the stage type of model, and every student is in front of some type of technology machine, when do I need to help out and assist those students? And when are they kind of falling behind? When are they falling off task? When are they not picking up particular concepts? So that's a really big piece. And obviously, as that progresses, things get into variety, right? So it's not only social media, it's internet activity, it's loyalty cards, it's credit card transactions. How do you take all that information and create actionable results? So talk about the 500-pound gorilla, right? So Amazon is, I'll talk about kind of big data in 3 industries, and we'll kind of start here with retail. So we are Amazon Prime household. I have 2 small children, as you saw. We do subscribe and save. So once a month, I get this massive box, and it has diapers and wipes and all that good stuff in it. And my wife is a big fan of Amazon as well. But you think about when I was growing up, and I wanted to buy, let's say, I don't know, Sega Genesis cartridge. You would call GameStop or whatever the store was back then, I probably can't remember, and say, do you have inventory? Do you actually have a copy of this game? And if so, then it was, can you reserve it? And then it was, Mom, Dad, can you drive me to the store to buy it? Now, any child, any person, any living human being on the planet, or I guess in the United States that has access to Amazon, but if you have the ability to process a payment, you can buy all of those things, and they're either going to be at your door in 48 hours and sometimes 24 hours. It's, the kind of the whole concept, and I say things to my wife a lot, is kind of the Amazon monster came out because now she'll read something on the internet, or I'll read something on the internet, and you'll just buy an item, and it'll show up at your door where you otherwise probably never would have purchased it because you would have to consciously go to the store, find it. The other day, she got some Indian reservation mud mask. You would never actually see that, and that would never actually show up at my house. But when you think about kind of the Amazon pitch, when it really around customer profiling, my wife is lucky enough to stay at home with our 2 kids, and all day she has 2 small children chasing after her, pulling on her pant legs, and she doesn't have much time for herself. But at 9 o'clock at night, she's sitting on the couch, she has a glass of wine, she's watching TV. That's when she should be targeted for marketing materials, for sales, because that's when she has the ability to take time for herself and figure out, okay, do I want to buy these pants? Do I want to buy this article of clothing? What have you? Otherwise, throughout the day, it's just going to be deleted. It's going to be completely passed off to the side. I have the same problem. Early in the morning or late in the evening, I work primarily in kind of a sales position, so historically thinking, it was always around prospecting needs to be done Tuesday through Thursday. And now there's all these articles that come out around, no longer do it Tuesday through Thursday, do it Saturday and Sunday, because that's the off hours, that's when people actually read their emails, that's when they're not inundated with things that are happening within their company. So it's very interesting concepts. But if you think about kind of retail, you have, Blockbuster closing, right? That was the Netflix, you have the Barnes & Noble, there's that image that goes around on the internet around, it wasn't Airbnb, doesn't own any inventory, but one of the biggest hotel chains in the entire world, right? When you think about kind of the grocery store with Amazon's purchase of Whole Foods, kind of what's that going to do, right? Is that going to kind of flip the game? Is Amazon Fresh, where they deliver kind of produce to your door, is the concept of going to the grocery store going to one day be eliminated? Who knows, kind of, but it's figuring out people that are in that industry need to be prepared for those kind of next level. So kind of moving on, thinking about agriculture. So obviously it's a really big piece around ensuring that there's enough food to serve kind of the masses, right? So it's predicting kind of storms and crop rotation, what's going to be the most lucrative for me this year in terms of the crops I'm planting and kind of the end result. But when you talk about kind of interesting piece, talk about Watson a lot when you talk about big data. Watson actually has an algorithm where you can go to your refrigerator, you can load in all of the items you have in your refrigerator, and it will provide you with a recipe, so that you're not wasting food. I mean, I saw this yesterday. I've never even known it existed, but it's one of those things where it's different applications outside of what you would expect, right? Most people think of Watson and they're, analyzing data, but you never thought that you could look in your refrigerator, open it up and say, okay, this is going to expire, this potentially will expire. Let me load this into a Watson algorithm and figure out kind of what should we be having for dinner, right? Because a lot of the food is wasted, just some of the statistics around 50% of salads that are actually purchased are actually wasted. And it's a massive amount of food that's being wasted. So now in terms of education, so I've been in the education space, that's actually not showing up very well, sorry. Been in the education space for about, it's 13 years now. I was previous to Learnosity, I worked with Blackboard for about 10 years. So LMS industry and then into the assessment industry. But as you see, I don't know if you can read that, but by 2023, the estimation is the edtech industry is going to be $240 billion. So it's a massive, massive number. And the way people are going to differentiate themselves is by looking at the data and analyzing the data and coming up with kind of actionable results, right? So not only is it around justifying the investment of the technologies they're paying for, but in higher ed, student retention is such an important type of scenario to make sure that students that are enrolled in your university and paying to take classes at your university are continuing to do so. And I'll kind of talk to you about kind of a scenario here in a second. So Georgia State, they have 16,000 kids. They did an analysis. I was actually talking to somebody in Melbourne, Australia last night. He brought it up to me. They did an analysis last year where they took 2.5 million grades over the past 10 years and tried to sort out trends. And one of the trends they found was any student that was majoring in political science, if their first political science course they took, if they got an A or a B, they had a 75% chance of graduating. They got a C or lower, they had a 25% chance of actually dropping out. So kind of, and then they created what they know as the, what they call the GPS system. And what it does is it allows, they increase the amount of counselors at the school so that they have this early warning system for students that are potentially going to drop out or potentially falling behind. So they can intervene immediately and they can ensure that those students remain at the institution, which is a very important thing from a higher ed perspective. But then you talk about kind of personalized learning, adaptive learning, the terminology that a lot of people are using, and it means a lot of things, and a lot of people are saying they do it. Who's doing it well, who knows, right? Who's, ultimately who's gonna come out on top? I think it's still to be seen. But the personalized learning and the adaptive learning aspect of it all is all primarily based on data. It's analyzing, okay, what is my preferred kind of teaching strategy? How do I want to ingest information? Am I a kinesthetic learner? Am I an auditory learner? If I failed this assessment, kind of where do I need to go next in the process? For us at Learnosity, when a student is assessed, we can track time on task, how long it took them to answer a question, did they navigate backwards, did they have to re-review something within the course? But it's on our customers to harness that information and create actionable results, right? So, and quite frankly, if it doesn't get to that point, from a community college perspective, Rhode Island yesterday, if you haven't seen it, they are now the 4th state to announce that community college is free. And that's going to be a huge pressure for colleges and universities within those states because now the students have the ability to go to school for 2 years at no cost to them, which is pretty massive when you think about kind of the end-all be-all. I contribute to my daughter's 529s, but when you look at kind of where the money is and the cost of education every year, it kind of makes me kind of sit in the corner and cry. But it's one of those things where if the industry doesn't adapt to kind of what is the next best trend, then we're in a poor situation. So I was actually at ASU GSV. If you have an opportunity to go to conferences, great conference. There's a lot of good people there and talking about great things. And I was sitting down with someone, and his whole vision around college ultimately was, what if like-minded colleges banded together where they have similar type of enrollment requirements? They banded together and let's say, it was all the Big Ten schools, and all they had was campuses. where the students would go to the campuses to have kind of social interaction and to do group projects. But if they wanted to take a class at Wisconsin, they could do so. If they want to take a class at Penn State, they could do so. If they want to take a class at University of Illinois, they could do so. And they would quickly and easily just group up with other students in the same geographic location and do those group projects. Or obviously with the technology that's available today, whether it's Hangouts, whether it's Slack, what have you, the ability to communicate with one another is very seamless, is very easy. I'm on the road quite a bit, and FaceTime is one of those things that allows you to get really close to home. So, is that kind of ultimately where we're going to go? Is it going to be a complete disruption of the standard college and university model? Because something has to give, and I think everyone in this room knows that. And is it the assessment-based type of solution? Is it when a student sits down and intervention is so important, but engagement is kind of the first solution, right? You have to make sure that the students are involved, they're engaged in the content that's being taught. And as you assess them on whether or not they grasp the concepts, you have to figure out kind of where do you go from there. And the best way to do that is the data that's being projected and the data that's being gathered out of these solutions. So it's kind of just some of the thoughts that I brought up and kind of came across as I thought about this presentation. But I don't know if there's any questions. That's kind of where I wanted to lead this conversation as to, I guess, the next, whether it's higher education, whether it's K-12, what does that mean? Because obviously a lot of us live in kind of the assessment industry today, and what is the ultimate result of big data, and how's that going to intervene with kind of what we're doing ultimately? So any questions from the group? Drop this. No. Well, I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.